Well, the Jubilee always has to happen after a year of the Shemitah, because you got 49, you got the 7th Shemitah, and then you get the 50th year. So it's always going to be in the year after the Shemitah. What does that have to do with prophecy or end times? Well, here's the thing. Was there the key moment in end time prophecy is the restoration of Israel as was predicted, and the first time that the Jewish people were restored to the land, or the land was given to them, it was called the Balfour Declaration. It was at the end of World War I, and it was 1917. Well, if you look at that the time when that happened, it was in the year following the Shemitah. That has to be the year of restoration. So you have this Jubilee, you have this restoration of the land, and you have all this thing of the Jubilee. Well, now what happens if you count 7 Shemitahs from that restoration, from that kind of prophetic Jubilee? If you count 7 Shemitahs from around 1917, it takes you to 1966, September 1966. The year after is September 1966 to September 1967. Did anything happen significantly? Well, that's when you have the other restoration, the restoration of Jerusalem, the Six-Day War, which is another prophetic key. So you've got this thing following the same exact pattern, exactly 50 years in this whole thing. But here's the other part of it, and again, I'm not saying it has to be, but if you follow from that last one and you go 7 Shemitahs forward, or the 7 sevens, where does it take you? It takes you to the Shemitah of 2014 and 2015, where we are coming to, and the next year would then be that. So if that would be the Jubilee. So if that follows, it could mean there could be something very significant happening linked to the Middle East as well, and the pattern is actually it always happens through war and a major prophetic event. So I'm just throwing this in. It's one of the things, the 7th Shemitah, that's also part of the Shemitah, the mystery of what's coming.
Let's go to Anthony in Philadelphia. Get you in here, Anthony. Thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Good morning, yes. Hi. The last show you had this gentleman who was a seer, and he predicted all of these things happening. Now you have a show where you got the Shemitah is lining up with everything throughout the years.
That's
it's
right.
lining up perfectly. Well, but then your gentleman says it doesn't have to be, and the gentleman on the show yesterday said that it doesn't have to happen if man can turn everything around. But it just seems to me that man cannot be dependent upon to turn everything around, because if he could, he would, and you would not have all these things happening constantly lining up with one another, and there would not be an end of times then. It just seems to me that man cannot be dependent upon to turn things around, because he is basically a defective species that is always going to screw things up, basically. Which is
you may be right there, Anthony. Man does screw things up a lot. So, Jonathan, when you look at all of this, maybe he's right. Maybe we can't change it because we're not capable of changing it.
Well, it's you got the mystery of free will and predestination, and they go together. Ultimately you have prophecies that I believe are going to come true, and at the same time you have here this really precise pattern. I believe because we are messed up, and I agree that will most likely lead to these things happening. My feeling is whether that it could very well be in this timing. But I'm always just cautious to step back to say, again, I don't want to put God in a box. But I do believe, again, as I stated, and I'm cautious about it, but I clearly believe there is a very great shaking coming.
What's behind it? Is it prophecy? Is it God? What's fueling it?
Yeah, I think I would think first of all it's all the above. It was given initially from Mount Sinai, literally through Moses. So this was a pattern, a law that was given. It's a pattern. It is something that operates in the supernatural and the natural. I mean, because there's just too much to be explained by anything. And given the right circumstances, it becomes, as I said, it becomes a sign, or can become a sign of warning and judgment. It is ultimately, if you talk to the rabbis, they'll say, the Shemitah was showing that really God is in charge of everything, and He owns everything. So it was originally going to be, again, a blessing, turn away from the worldly things and turn back to God. It was it was a Sabbath. But again, that's where, in this case, it becomes a sign of judgment, and that's where it gets a bit scary. So, and the thing is, we were talking about a 3,500-year-old thing that is affecting things to this day. And I want to just throw in, because we've had a few things the people along these lines saying this, that is that, regardless of what has to be, that doesn't say how each of us have to be. In other words, you can have things happening around you, but how you respond makes a difference. There's a verse that says, calamity comes, but the wise person prepares for it, and that's really the reason I wrote the book. And it's and the same with the Harbinger. It's sounding an alarm, but so that we can get ready. If people say, is there hope? Well, if there was no hope, there'd be no warning. What's the point of warning if there's no hope? So it's really how we respond to it, and us getting right and getting ready and getting prepared and right with God. And so that's really the whole point of all of it. And so you don't have to fear, but you have to be right. And interesting, when Obama was reelected, in his inaugural, he had a poet, give a kind of, a praise or something. And what he mentioned in that inaugural was the Harbinger. He spoke of the tower going up and a symbol of our resilience, which is it totally paraphrases Isaiah 9:10 and the Harbinger thing. So there is this thing going on. So not to say that it's going to determine who's going to tell us who's going to be elected, but the leaders are crucial in this mystery.
Okay, let's take some final calls here. Tom is in Greenfield, Indiana now. Tom, go ahead.
George, thank you very much. Long-time listener.
Thank you.
Jonathan, pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
My first trip in Jerusalem, I was unpacking my bags September the 22nd, 1987, and somebody said, here comes the opening music of the festival celebrating the rebirth of Babylon. Wow. 2 days later, I'm on the Temple Mount underneath the Dome of the Winds, and you know what the Dome of the Winds is all about. Let's do the Golden Gate. So, very serious individual. I got this an article about the Paul of the Temple, a book. I'm a big fan of BAR magazine, etc. But in 1956, a gentleman named David Noel Friedman did a book on the Babylonian Chronicles, British Museum. Ironically, they got the Babylonian tablets underneath the gates of Ishtar in 1907, 300 tablets, and conclusively, the city fell in August of 587. It were 13 pages. That's why I bring your attention. I probably got 50 books with the title Jerusalem in it, and that 86, 87 date. If you read all the books lately, about the last 50 years, that date switched. I didn't know why, and I was fortunate enough to find a book. Anyway, The Babylonian Chronicle by David Noel Friedman, 1956, published. I'll give you the name of the book because you're a serious student. The Biblical Archaeological Reader, published by Quadrangle Books in Chicago, 1961. Conclusive. It's a heck of a book, very studious, but those records really prove it. 587 was the year. Anyway, on the Shemitah, obviously it's 7 times 60, 360. We got all the proof that the period of time is 2,520 days for centuries. And of course, since we've gone to 365-day calendar, you have the VADAR added to months. My question is the compensation factor, because it's always been at 520 days. Flinders Peak, as you know, proved that the 25.20 is the sacred cubit, the secret to everything. I'm sure you're aware of what I'm talking about. That 2520 versus, for example, 2564 days between 2008 and 2015, and I think it's 2560 days rather than 2520. The compensation, do the rabbis keep a separate books on the 360, but they compensate the Shemitah to keep them accurate enough? But what happens to the dates? Because for 2,000 years was always matching up the 360-day year, which, of course, was 2,520 days, which is the secret to everything. So, important deal. Count them very carefully, very much aware of things that I've got secrets revealed to me that I would prefer to maybe contact you personally some other time. It's magnificent thing. Seven goes in everything. I divided 6-digit calculated numbers on events going back to the 6th century to this century. That's 518 BC. It's funny. 69 years in our calendar, 2,501 days. It's 7 years in the old Bible, so 69 years of ours are there. So 518 matches up to 1967, and I know all about the war, and I've got 50 titles with Jerusalem, favorite books, Oh Jerusalem, love the effort, love your work, and the thing about the dates.
All right, well, let's see if you want to react to that, Jonathan, before the clock gets us here.
Well, yeah, thank you. There is a link between the Hebrew calendar and the Babylonian calendar. Even the month of Tishri is linked to Tishru in the Babylonian. But what happens is, for those who don't know, it's basically a lunar calendar, but then it gets compensated according to the solar to keep it on track with a leap month. So it is very established when the Shemitahs will come, really from now to 1,000 years.
Let's go to Sam in Virginia Beach. He's been holding for a while. Sam, go ahead.
Yes, please. The mystery of the Shemitah started with Joseph or Yusuf, the prophet, the son of Jacob, the brother of the 12, when he's thrown in the well and then taken to Egypt, and he was imprisoned. And after that, the king had a dream of seven fatty cows. Yes?
Yes. There's a link there, and that is that the very first mentioning of the 7-year has to do with the economy. It has to do with famine and with abundance, and it's exactly that. You have 7 years of abundance, and you have 7 years of famine. And you had a warning to prepare. So yes, the pattern is there from ancient times, and it's still determining our lives.
The rise and fall of nations. Where does the United States fit in with the rise or the fall?
I believe that the warning here is that if we do not get it right, if we do not return, that we will watch the end of the American age as we know it, and the prosperity. Because one of the things about the Shemitah is saying that all the blessings we have are not from ourselves, and if we turn from our source, if we turn from God, they'll be removed, and we are watching a nation in free fall, and that is the warning. And I believe if we do not turn back, we're going to witness that change, and that's what the Shemitah brings.
Let's go to Carol in St. John's, Florida. Go ahead.
Hi there. My question, I have two questions, and you almost sort of talked about it just now. Why is all this Shemitah stuff seems to be related to the United States specifically? And then the second part is you talked about studying it back through like the beginning of World War I. Have you traced it back to events prior to that?
Yeah, it actually, when you look at the crashes and you say you go back even to the 19th century, it still follows the pattern. And as far as the America, this has affected the whole world. I mean, and the depression and the stock markets and the cataclysm affect the entire world. However, America's right now been in the center of history, so I think that's one reason. And the other reason is that America was actually founded after the pattern of Israel. The Puritans founded it to be in Israel, and they actually foretold that if we follow God, we'll be the most blessed nation. If we turn away from God, the judgments that came on Israel will come upon us. They said that. That's the Shemitah.
Well, a few more moments to go. 1 minute to go, Jonathan. The clock is ticking. September 25th of this year through September 13th of 2015. But can something happen economically, let's say, on the 25th of this year, this month?
It could. In the case of 1930, the Shemitah of 1937, the day the Shemitah began, the next day everything crashed. So it could. My sense is if something does, it's going to be more subtle than what happens at the end.
And this prediction of at the end, is that based on your interpretation, or is there something else there?
It's based on two things. One is the actual history. It's continuous. And the second thing is that actually in the pattern from the Bible, it is the end that is the crescendo when you have the day of nullification.
All right, my friend. Be well, Jonathan. Let's keep in touch. Say hi to Joe Farah for me, will you?
Thanks so much, George.